Welcome to another episode.
Excuse me, but what about women in the third world?
You only think that because you're ugly.
But there are black Republicans.
I can't be racist. I have a good friend, Jose.
Reverse racism.
Excuse me, but...
Sorry to interrupt, but can I take over the conversation and make you give me a complete history of it, even though I can and should do a basic level of research before inserting myself into the discussion and making you do unpaid intellectual labor that I will dismiss at the end by simply saying, well, that's how you see it.
Here we go again. During this season of The FREQ Show, we've walked you through some key terms that you may have come across more and more as you scan social media or watch the news, but their meanings may be a bit unfamiliar to you. We've talked misogyny and patriarchy, white supremacy, intersectionality, and privilege. These are incredibly important tools for understanding how our world works and how we understand ourselves and others.
But here's the thing. There are a lot of people invested in keeping you in the dark about how these systems of power operate. They don't want you to be aware of how misogyny limits women or how white supremacy undergirds our entire society, from the schools we can attend to the ways we style our hair, or why it's vital to bring an intersectional awareness to our social justice work.
There are large and small, overt and covert, explicit and implicit ways of diverting your attention from these important conversations and steering them away from those difficult lines that force us to acknowledge our own complicity in upholding various systems of inequality. And make no mistake, many of these diversionary tactics are incredibly effective. Maybe not effective at countering your arguments, but very effective at making you rage close all 27 BuzzFeed tabs on your laptop and stress eat a bunch of burritos. Because in the end, that's really all they have to do, derail the conversation. The people who use them aren't actually interested in offering thoughtful or factual counter-arguments, and they sure as hell don't want to argue in good faith. They see you cruising down the knowledge superhighway, and all they need to do is yank the steering wheel just a little bit.
I've been doing this work for a decade, and trust me, I've encountered every single derailing tactic there is. In fact, right now, there's a crowd of devil's advocates who are leering over their keyboards in the race to be the first person to let me know that we've once again gotten things so wrong. And I guarantee you 95% of them will use one of these tried and true derailing tactics to shut me down. But the thing is, when you know what's coming, you can take appropriate action. And by appropriate action, we mean ignore them. Trying to argue with a derailer online is like punching a sand dune. You can do it if you want to, but your arms will get tired and there's absolutely no point.
To illustrate some of the worst derailing tactics, I'd like to introduce you to this stuffed seal I bought, specifically so that I would have something to take my aggression out on when the Chads of the world infest my mentions. Every so often, Chads are overcome with the need to tell black people Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. And also, their girlfriends actually like looking at sexualized video game characters, so they can't be sexist. And isn't affirmative action just reverse racism?
Wait. You're going too fast. Let's back up a bit. It's actually cool that you have that stuffed seal because it allows me to introduce one of the most egregious derailing tactics. This one cloaks itself in a disingenuous desire to be educated. Thanks to artist David Malky and his hilarious webcomic Wondermark, we've got a name for this trollish behavior. Sea lioning. Say you're having a back and forth with one of your followers on Twitter about anti-trans reporting in the Atlantic. Can you believe they ran that story?
I can't believe they keep letting that guy write.
Wait, can you explain to me exactly what it means to be anti-trans?
So you're trying to have a conversation with your followers about how a recent article is full of bias.
I guess I just need you to explain trans identity at a 101 level for me and why this piece is full of bias. I'm just trying to learn.
Okay. Let's start with,
I also would like to see some evidence of this anti-trans bias you claim.
I'm trying to...
I won't accept your sources!
What?
Or your own lived experience, but I demand that you cater to me right now. I have done none of the basic research on this issue. I am suddenly so consumed with discussing this with you right now.
Oh my God, shut up!
Hey, there's no need to get annoyed. I'm just trying to have a reasonable exchange of ideas.
You see? Sea lions just want to understand. Come on, if this idea were really important to you, you would drop everything in your life and explain it to their satisfaction using the tone, language, and resources they deem legitimate, right? Sea lions demand your intellectual and emotional labor, but most importantly, they just want your attention. They will never, ever be satisfied, and they are uninterested in doing the bare minimum of work themselves. Beware the sea lion.
Definitely, because when a sea lion doesn't get his way, when any derailer figures out that they can't suck all the air out of the room, they will inevitably resort to another failsafe tactic: tone policing. Tone cops like to huff that if only progressives would be more polite, then we could persuade more people to our side. Guess what? If you can't be convinced that U.S. immigration policy separating children from parents is inhumane, that anti-trans legislation leads to violent state-sanctioned death, or that calling immigrants vermin might just be beyond the pale, without someone saying it with a string of emojis and using soothing spa music, you might not actually be interested in being convinced.
When sea lioning and tone policing don't work, harassers often duck behind what's called concern trolling. If you're a self-identified feminist, you've definitely been hit with this one. In the Middle Earth of the concern troll, people are only allowed to care about one issue at a time. All issues are discrete and are never interconnected. And there's an objective scale of human misery that determines how much any woman, and they mean white Western women, can point out injustice. For example, if you point out that, say, it would be cool if we gave Latina women a shot at directing blockbuster Hollywood movies, old Oog the concern troll will hang glide into the conversation to remind you, girls in Pakistan can't even attend school, so shut up, princess.
But in an absolutely shocking twist, it turns out these guys don't actually care about Pakistani girls who want an education. They don't know anything about the issue and certainly aren't working to address it. As far as these professional, but what about the hijab activists are concerned, women in other parts of the world have it worse than Western women, so Western women aren't allowed to point out any inequality or oppression in their own lives. The other name I have for this derailing tactic is, I have a vague memory about some kidnapped Nigerian girls, so why are you so concerned with whether American women earn as much as their male counterparts? It's a long title, but we think it really captures the approach.
None of these guys is advocating that we actually turn our collective attention to the plight of vulnerable women in other societies. They just find it useful to point the finger elsewhere, usually at brown men. Let's be honest, many of these dudes would probably vote today to issue a red handmaiden's robe to every woman in America, but we're supposed to believe they're champions of women's rights in rural Afghanistan? This type of concern troll refuses to acknowledge that most feminists are well aware that misogynist behaviors and beliefs manifest themselves in a whole range of distinct cultural expressions. We also know that it's important that we recognize our own privilege when it comes to the world at large. But that's not what these concern trolls care about. They're not calling for a more nuanced and intersectional analysis of global feminist issues. They're blowing hot air.
Unfortunately, that's not the only species of concern troll out there, nor is it necessarily the most prevalent. There's also the kind who like to offer their version of constructive criticism. They cloak their comments under the guise of being helpful. See, they just want to point out the million ways that you're undercutting your position by doing something they've identified as being harmful to your cause. It might be the way you frame an argument. It might be the emotion you express while talking about an issue that has affected you personally. It might just be that you don't respond to his overwhelming brilliance with the urgency and breadth he thinks he deserves.
This kind of Chad will swear up and down that he's on your side, but he just wants to offer you his invaluable estimation of where and how you're failing to present yourself as a legitimate authority. He wants you to think that this is done for your benefit, but it's really not. It's about tearing you down and making himself look objective, responsible, and smarter than you, by expressing his concern for your perceived failings. He just wants other people to take you seriously, okay?
Sea lioning, tone policing, and concern trolling are by no means the only type of derailment tactics out there. There's also gish galloping and gaslighting, devil's advocacy and dogpiling, retaliation, and the rhetorical hypothetical infinity loop. And really a million other crappy ways to shut down the conversations that people of color, trans folks, the disabled, the undocumented, women, and gender nonconforming folks are trying to have about their lives and the issues that concern them.
But whether it's concern trolling, gaslighting, or some new fresh hell, it's meant to distract you from mobilizing against unjust structures of power and the people who benefit from them. Hell, sometimes they just want to interrupt you and tell you why you were so wrong to like the last Star Wars movie. You don't have to engage with derailers. Their arguments are intellectually bankrupt at their core and emotionally manipulative by design. block, mute, ignore, and keep talking about the things that are important to you. We hope you found this video useful, and hey, if you're an educator who's using our work in your classroom, we'd love to connect with you.